Hi everyone, Ariana here from Well-Fed Photography. We are so delighted to be bringing you this new podcast, which you will be able to enjoy visually as well as via audio. And it's called Living a Life Well-Fed. And when we started Well-Fed Photography, what we wanted to do was really create a movement. We wanted people to be encouraged, be invited to live life in a way that really fed them at a soul level, that spoke to all aspects of their being, and that encouraged them to know that they could live the life of their dreams and they could live life at the highest level possible. So what we'd like to do with this venture is to bring on other individuals who are living their life's purpose, who have specialized skills and knowledge to share, so that they may speak to different parts of you, and so that you can be able to gain more knowledge and integrate it into your own life, whether it's physical health, sexual health and well-being, if it's parenting, or just all other aspects, spirituality. So we're bringing it all to the table, and we hope that you enjoy this. If there is a topic that you'd like to hear more on, please let us know, and otherwise we'll get started. So I'd like to welcome Pam from Hand Parenting. Pam, I would do an introduction, but I think it might be best actually for you to just chat a bit about yourself, who you are, and what Hand Parenting is.
Oh, thanks, Ariana, and thank you so much for having me here for this opportunity. I always love to talk about parenting, so it's a great, I'm really appreciating that. So yes, I'm Pamela Quiery. I'm based in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I've been a parent, I suppose, for nearly 10 years now. My daughter is about 9.5, and I have a son who is 5 years old, about 5.5 years old. So it's been such a huge journey for me becoming a parent, and it's really just life-changing, isn't it? So as I followed that path and really explored what it was to become a mum, I was presented with many challenges along the way, as I'm sure most of us are in our parenting journey. And shortly after my son was born, I was so fortunate to come across the hand-in-hand parenting approach. So I was just immediately really drawn to that, style of parenting. It's a very gentle, very respectful approach to parenting that's based around connection. So I was really drawn to that, and it sort of answered many questions that I was struggling with around parenting. So it was a huge help to me. So I started using the hand-in-hand tools, which I'll be able to talk about probably over the course of this interview. And it was such a huge help to my parenting that I just really became quite passionate about it, and just find it so helpful that I realized I really wanted to share what I'd learned with other parents. So a couple of years ago, I did the instructor certification with Hand-in-Hand, and I got my certification last January, so right before the pandemic hit, and and I was planning a lovely in-person class in Belfast, to sit in the same room with 5 or 6 other parents, and I was really looking forward to that, and it had to be cancelled due to coronavirus. So since then, I've been doing my work online. I've been leading parenting classes and one-to-one work with parents online since then. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned some questions that came up for you in your parenting journey, and I'm sure that there are some common questions that you receive from parents as well. So could you highlight maybe some of the top few questions and maybe some brief answers of, pointing them in the direction that Hand-in-Hand Parenting would recommend?
Yeah, so I suppose starting with myself, because I think everybody has a common story or common questions that come up. So what was coming up for me whenever my daughter was very young, and whenever she was a baby, I was very much and still am very much an attachment parent. Like, that was really important to me. I wanted to meet all her needs, and I breastfed, and we co-slept, and I carried her in a sling, and it was really that relationship was really important. But I was really struggling with it. I find like it was absolutely draining, and especially as my daughter got a little bit older, I suppose I didn't understand what was going on with her emotionally. So I was trying to meet all her needs, and I found that my own needs were getting pushed to one side, to the point where I was, approaching burnout and just absolutely exhausted. And even though I was trying to meet all her needs, she it was really difficult to deal with her. She wouldn't take no for an answer. She was the ruler of the roost. And, I suppose, if she started to cry or she started to get upset about anything, I was sort of get into this panic and I didn't know what to do about it. And I would end up trying to distract her from her feelings, or I would try to, work around. I would do anything just to work around what was going on, and to get her to do what I wanted, and to try and keep her happy, I suppose. So that really wasn't working for either of us because we couldn't get anything done. I remember when she was about 2 years old, she wouldn't, she refused to have her hair brushed. She refused to brush her teeth. She refused to get dressed in the morning. She was a very spirited young lady. So I suppose I was just, and from my side, I was trying to do everything to meet her needs emotionally. But I was like, this isn't working because I'm exhausted and I can't get her out of the house in the morning. And what am I missing? So I really felt I was missing something, and that's when I well, it wasn't until her brother, my son, came along that I discovered Hand in Hand Parenting, and things really went up a notch then because she had a new brother. I didn't have as much time to give her attention, and she completely she really struggled with that. It was really difficult for her. She had me to herself for 4 years, and then suddenly she had to share me with her little brother. And that was very difficult for her. And I found it really difficult as well because I couldn't give her all that attention. And I found myself really losing my temper with her a lot. I just ran out of patience for her. I was getting very resentful towards her, which was not the parent I wanted to be at all. And I was shouting at her regularly. So I think all of these things are probably very familiar to many parents, these kind of situations where we really want the best for our children. And yet, we're doing our very best, but things aren't quite working and we don't quite understand what's going on. And there are some big struggles. So then I discovered Hand in Hand Parenting. And the first thing that, so we have 5 tools in Hand in Hand Parenting, which are 5 really practical strategies that you can use in your parenting every day. Because I was reading parenting books and very much around the attachment side of parenting, but I didn't know how to apply those things day to day. So the first big thing with Hand in Hand Parenting is one of the tools we call Stay Listening, which is about listening to children's feelings and really understanding children's feelings. So so I read about this, and this was a bit of a revelation for me because I would tend to just avoid tears, avoid tantrums, avoid. And it was a big relief to me just to say, actually, when our children have big emotions, it's okay to allow those, and it's okay to be there. And I mean, they need our safety, they need our love and our warmth to help and support them through expressing those big feelings. But when they can actually express those big feelings, it's a really important thing for them to get them out of their system, and afterwards they can be much more relaxed, and they can let go of these rigid things that they're holding on to. So that was a huge revelation for me, and I started to listen to my daughter. And I remember the first time I listened to her crying, and it was over something really small, which is so common. Our children can often just lose it over like something very, very small. And I decided this time, it was, the pack of breadsticks that you get in the really, really long ones, and some of them are usually broken. And she'd eaten her way through all the big ones, and all I had was broken ones. And I just said to her, she was not happy with this, and she got very upset over it. And I just said to her, I'm sorry, love. These are the only ones we have. We only have the broken ones. And normally I would have been like panicking, looking for another box and get out the whole one and make everything okay. But this time I just said, no, I'm sorry. This is all I have. And she got so upset and she cried. And instead of distracting her or trying to fix the problem, I just listened to her. I got down on her level and I made eye contact. And I said, I know this is hard. And I really listened to her feelings about it. And she cried really hard. And it was very hard for me to listen to her crying like that. And then suddenly she started saying, I hate having a brother. Why did you ever have him? Send him away. I don't want him anymore. And it turned into this big outpouring of emotion around how difficult it was for her to have a little brother. And I listened to that, and I didn't try to fix it or didn't try and convince her that, she really loved having a brother and there were so many good things about it. I just let her feel that, pain and that sadness, and it all poured out. And I listened and listened for about 20 minutes to this. And then afterwards she was, she had a big sigh and she gave me a big hug, and off she went and played. And, she went off and played by herself, really independently for quite a long time after that, very contented, much more loving towards her brother. So I saw a big shift in her just from having that one big cry. So that was a huge thing. That was a huge shift in my parenting with her, and a huge shift in my understanding of how to be with children's emotions. And that's been really life-changing for me.
And did that take a bit of a weight off your shoulders as well? Because I suppose it shifted your relationship to where you could just be with her rather than having to be the fixer or the pacifier or the solver of all the problems. And she could really just be this whole being that was complete, and you could be a whole being who was complete and just relating to one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. So exactly. I didn't have to fix anything. I didn't have to do anything. I just had to be there and present with her. And I realized that she could figure this out herself. So, with my help, but, she could cry hard about her brother and come out the other side of it, and with my support right there. But I didn't have to fix anything. I didn't have to do anything about it. But then I suppose after that, I was like, great, I've got this all, figured out now. But I mean, I did find it really hard to listen to her feelings, and big feelings of my own would come up then. And then at other times, she still would get frustrated with her brother and be quite impatient with him. And that would send me off. So that was the next thing, was that I would get very triggered by that. And, I was doing all this work, sort of listening to her feelings and connecting with her through play and different things. But I was still really losing my temper with her. And, I would just get this rage would just come up really, really quickly. And I would get cross with her. And that was just really not the parent I wanted to be. So then there's another of the hand-in-hand tools is called listening partnerships for parents. So it's all about parents getting the support they need, and getting the emotional support to parent in the way that they want to parent. And we can't do this alone. And our society and our culture is so set up to not support parents. So we have, we're living all in our little boxes, especially at the minute. We're very isolated. Many of us don't have close family or close friends around that we can share the load with. And that puts huge pressure on us emotionally. And then we have these little emotional beings that we need to be so present for, and we need to, really support in their big emotions. And it's that saying, but it's so true though, that you really just can't give from an empty cup. And when you're burnt out, you can't be patient with your kids. You can't listen to them. You can't be empathetic towards them whenever you're just giving from this empty cup. So listening partnerships are all about, bringing that balance back and supporting parents. So I was being Irish and not being very comfortable with my own feelings, like that. I had read about listening partnerships as one of the hand-in-hand tools, and I was like, this is not for me. We don't talk about our feelings here. But I suppose I was trying all the other tools, and I knew that it was my own emotions that was holding me back. Now that was the limiting factor, and I needed to look at that. So I decided to give listening partnerships a go. I found myself a listening partner. And what you do is you exchange time. So you just pair up with another parent on the phone, and you decide, 20 minutes each. So, I would take my turn first, and I would just speak for 20 minutes. I would talk about what was hard. You can talk about whatever you want to, whether it's your parenting, your children, your partner, whatever is your work situation, whatever is difficult for you, whatever is causing you emotional sort of stress, you can talk about that. And after the 20 minutes, you set a timer. After the 20 minutes, you simply swap, and then you listen to the other person. And the other person just listens with warmth and with holding the thought that this is a good parent. And that's all you have to do. So it is just amazing. The power of listening is so amazing, just to be able to have that space without judgment. And it's actually quite helpful that it's a relative, stranger that you're talking to. You do form a very close bond with your listening partnerships, but they're not in your life, so you don't have to like, you know, you can bring stuff that you maybe wouldn't be comfortable bringing to family members or friends, and and that just made all the difference to me. So as I used listening partnerships more and more, I spoke about the times when I lost my temper with my daughter, and I realized I had a lot of resentment. You know, she was getting all this attention and she was still misbehaving as I saw it. And I was able to work on that. And, you know, gradually, it's not like a quick fix, but gradually, slowly, I noticed that that trigger was softening, and I was losing my temper less and less with my daughter, and been able to be much more available to her. So that made all the difference. So that was over 5 years ago now, and I have a listening partnership once or twice a week, every week since then. You know, it's just an essential part. It's just one of my tools. It's one of the things I can't go without. I can't go without it now. It's just so helpful.
I love that. I love the idea too of like it being someone that isn't necessarily in your social circle or your family circle, because there can be so much guilt and shame around when you're not being the parent that you thought you would be or that you want to be. So I think to be able to share that with someone who literally has the intention, they're holding the intention of you being a wonderful parent as they're listening to you, is hugely powerful. But you were going to add something else too.
Well, no, I was just going to try and I was just going to try and circle back, because I knew you'd asked me something which I went way off on. So, but I think, you know, you were asking me about common things that come up for parents, and I think that's probably one of the most the most common things that comes up is people is losing their temper with their children and having this rage and having these triggers and finding it really hard to stay patient with their children. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, and I think parents often think that they're alone with that. And that's the other thing about listening partnerships, is it really helps us learn about ourselves. It helps us reflect on our own, how we were parented ourselves. And, you know, it really helps us break down the isolation as well, because we realize that other parents are struggling too, that we're not the only parent in the world that loses it with our children, and we're not the only parent in the pandemic that is struggling, you know, that many other parents are as well. And you know, that makes just such a huge difference.
And is there anything within hand-in-hand parenting about reparenting yourself, or being the parent that you needed in those moments that you are feeling triggered, or that you do have these realizations around perhaps how you're parented and what you actually needed as a child and what you maybe need now?
Yeah, absolutely. So with listening partnerships, listening partnerships are all about, you know, at the beginning, you can just use it to vent and let off steam about how difficult things are. But then there is a real process with it of those feelings that come up are familiar, or more often than not, 99 times out of 100, they're very familiar feelings, those big feelings that come up. And you know, as you get more into listening partnerships, you can ask the person you're listening to ask them, you know, is that a familiar feeling? And they can trace that feeling back to a situation in their own childhood. And then as they you know, when they feel the safety of the listener, they can cry and they can laugh and they can tremble and they can sweat, and that helps to release that old emotion. So whenever you release that old emotion, and you know, in the safety of a good listener, you can really move on from it. So, and it gives you such insight as well about why this thing that your child does is so difficult. And like, one of the things I worked on in my listening partnerships was around playing, and I didn't want to play with my kids. And that's another really common thing. And it's like, parents like, don't make me play with my kids. I'm around them all day and I just can't play with them. So you can bring things like that to listening partnerships. So, you know, I worked on that, and, you know, I talked about how frustrated I was and how I just didn't want to play. And then my listening partner asked me, you know, what was it like for you to play as a child? And I went back, and, you know, there was 4 of us children. We were very close in age, and you know, my parents, they didn't have time to play with us one-to-one. So I never had that like one-to-one play time. So, and, you know, every child would love that, you know, and I found that very hard to offer my own children, because it was something I didn't have a huge experience of myself. So as I was able to work on that and you know, how hard that was, then I noticed that I was more able to play with my children. A space just opened up, and I was more able just to to play with my children without all this baggage of, this isn't fair and why should I have to play with my kids, and all this stuff that we tell ourselves. So yeah, it's a very powerful tool.
Was there anything else you wanted to add to that, or will we go in? We had a few questions that were related to some of the things that you're saying, so I don't know if you want to go into some of those.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So you mentioned playing with your children, and I think a lot of parents have similar experiences. I've seen parents posting on Instagram about not wanting to go to the park with their children. I've seen, people post about the fact that, like for me, my block was feeling like I didn't know how to play with my children at different ages, how to engage with them. Mm-hmm. But what I learned was that they just needed my presence. And so I was able to take a bit of pressure off myself when it came to feeling like I needed to know how to play. But if you were to give parents tips, especially at the moment where maybe they aren't having many breaks or breaks at all from their children, what are some new ways that they can engage with their children? What are some refreshed ways that they can engage with their children that is beyond just the necessary getting them fed, setting boundaries, those types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that as parents, especially at the minute when kids are at home a lot, we feel like we're spending so much time with them. So we don't want to, and, we're sort of, well, I'll speak for myself, kind of half-heartedly playing something, and you're sort of thinking, how can I get over here and get the laundry done, or answer an email, or whatever it might be. So you feel like, you feel like you're spending so much time with your kids. But one of the hand-in-hand tools we call special time, which is about one-to-one play with children. And so what you do, and it's different from all the other times you might just play with your kids a little bit. So what it is, it's a set amount of time, and you set a timer. I usually do about 20 minutes with my kids, but it's no more than half an hour, because you can't give them your attention for longer than that. But it can be as short as 2 minutes or 5 minutes. I tend to try and go for 20 minutes, and I set the timer. And then for that little bit of time, my daughter she's in charge of the situation. She leads the play. I do have a couple of ground rules, where she can't eat sweets and she can't watch screens, although sometimes sometimes we allow that, but mostly we don't. So she leads the play, and all I have to do is I just have to spend that bit of time thinking how wonderful she is, just really giving her my full enthusiasm and warmth, and what are we going to do now, and just throwing myself into it wholeheartedly. But I don't direct it, so she's in charge of it. She directs the play and I follow her lead. And it's whatever she might want to do. It's usually physical. So we're usually building slides on the stairs with the mattresses and sliding down and jumping off things, and and as long as it's, you have to, if they want to jump out the window and it's not safe, you have to draw a line there. But really you're trying to say yes, because we say no to our children so many times a day. And this little bit of 20 minutes time, you're saying yes as much as you can, and playing in any way that they want to, and just showering them in your unconditional love during that time. And it's so good, because the timer is going to go off in 20 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, whatever capacity you have. So you can really throw yourself into it, because there's going to be an end to it. So that can be so helpful. I mean, with my son who's 5, if in the morning I do 20 minutes of special time with him, he's got my undivided attention. And then for the rest of the day, I don't feel, I still, obviously, you still play with them and you still have to interact with them. But I find that he's had his big dose of connection. He's had time with me one-to-one without his sister annoying him. And then he can get on with his day, and he's a lot more content. He feels a lot more secure. He knows he's going to get another special time tomorrow. So, it kind of really boosts him up. And then I find that our day usually goes a lot better whenever I can do that. So, it's a great tool to use, and it takes the pressure off you too, because you can just concentrate on, connecting with the joy of being a parent again for a little while, for a short time, and not having to decide, you let your kids decide. So they're much more creative than we are when it comes to things like that as well. And when they get into it, they'll come up with all sorts of things. And it also helps them process whatever difficulty is going on in their lives. They'll actually bring that to play, and you don't need to interpret it or anything, but they can often work through, difficulties with friendships or difficulties with school or whatever it might be. They can often work through that in special time as well. So that's a great one to use.
Definitely. I have to say, I read that in one of the Hand in Hand newsletters last year, and it was it was such a game changer for me, because what I found is I was trying to do both, as in, take care of the household and also give time to my children. And it wasn't working, because I would be wanting to get chores done around the house and my children would want me. But what I found is if I set a timer for 15 minutes, I knew that it was 15 minutes. I knew that I would still have time to get other things done. But what happened was I would actually find myself enjoying it so much that I would press the timer for another 15 minutes. And so we get about a half an hour in. So it was longer than I had even anticipated, because I was enjoying it so much. And as soon as it was done, my children were actually happier to do independent play, because they'd had that engagement with me, and they didn't mind that I was off washing the dishes just afterwards. So it reduced so much of the pressure and the triggering that I had experienced from trying to juggle both, household things and parenting. So I am so grateful for that. It changed so much for me in a positive way. And I would highly encourage anyone to give it a try if you haven't already.
Oh, that's so good to hear, Ariana, that how you use that and how it worked in your family. It's really lovely. Yeah. Lucky
amazing. And one of the things that I read within the newsletter too is about how it does build that trust. So they are able to process things. And one of the things that was also game changing for me was that when your children bring emotion, when they share emotions with you, it's because they feel safe to do so. So it's actually a very positive thing that they're sharing their emotions with you, whereas sometimes maybe if we grew up with, say, parents or other individuals around us that weren't comfortable with emotion and really tried to shut it off, like we can change that with them, and we can let them know that it's okay to share that with us, and know that there will be an end. Like you said, your daughter cried for about 20 minutes, but it came to an end. It wasn't just endless, so it was manageable in that regard. So that was also helpful for me to learn as well.
Yeah, and our children are very discerning, so they'll know who the emotionally safe adult is that they can come to. So parents will often say, I don't understand, when my child is at school, they're so well behaved, and when they come home they are an absolute nightmare and they won't do anything, and they get really cross and they start fighting with their brother, and that's because they've come home to the safety of their mom, or their dad, or whoever it might be, they feel emotionally safe with, and all this stuff they've just been holding in on their best behavior all day, they just let it all out, and that can be difficult. But when you start using things like, when you have that understanding, that's what's happening. And when you start using things like special time, like something you can do is when your kids come home from school, you can, if they do have that sort of difficulty, you can do even just 10 minutes special time with them. And that can really change the whole dynamic. They might have a big cry at the end of it when it's over, but then you'll notice that their mood will lift after that, and they've been able to shed that stress and all those things that have been going on in school. So that can be really helpful, just to have that understanding.
Absolutely. And I know we won't dive into it here, but I was in my 20s whenever I first learned just the power of tears and how healing they are, and the fact that based on the types of tears we're releasing, whether it's, from being stressed, whether it's fear, whether it's happy tears, the actual composition of the tears change. And our body needs to be able to process emotion, or else we can store it in the body. So it's actually really good for them to have that outlet. It's good for them to be able to release it, and they can go on being a bit lighter afterwards. And that's going to help everyone in the family.
Absolutely.
So we had a few other questions come in. We touched on quite a bit already just through that conversation, but one of them that came in was that the individual was feeling immense guilt about not being able to provide a sibling for their child. So for a parent facing that, what are some words of wisdom, or what's some advice that you would share?
Well, I know, I mean, that is so difficult, and my heart really goes out to that mum. It's I can tell she really wants to do her very best for her child, and is really putting herself in her child's shoes, and having a huge amount of empathy for her child. And that is so lovely, and such a lucky child to have a mum looking out for them like that. It's very sweet, but it's very difficult as well. And I think that we all have situations in our lives that are out of our control, and that we, things, when we look back, even just, to do with parenting, there's things that we would want to change, or or things that were just completely out of our control, and we just weren't able to do anything differently. But what I think is that to be able to work through those feelings of guilt would be, I think that would be a really helpful thing. And that's exactly what, if somebody in my class, that would be exactly what I'd be pointing them towards, the listening partnership tool, of having a listener and being able to really just talk about that guilt, and talk about, even just talking about the hopes that you had about your family, and the grief that came along with, not having the family that you always wanted. And being able to really talk about that, and get to the feelings underneath, and be able to express that, whether it's through listening partnerships or through any other, even if it's with a trusted friend or with a counsellor or anything like that. But I find the listening partnerships are so helpful, because it's just that safe space where nobody's giving you advice or nobody's telling you how to do something. They're just listening, and that can really shift things, and because when we are holding on to those feelings, and it's very difficult then to think clearly about the situation. So I think that something like listening partnerships could be so helpful there to clear out those feelings, and then to start to see that maybe there are some good things about being an only child, and that only child, like I think I've read that that they've done research into only children, and they're extremely happy, and they love to have the attention of both parents, and they don't have to share it, and they tend to be really strong leaders, and so there's all these things that once you get through that difficulty, that you can maybe start to open up into other possibilities there. But it's okay to acknowledge that sadness as well, and that grief for what you really wanted for your family, and I think you need to go through that first before you can even think about those other possibilities. So so sending lots of love to that sweet mum.
I love that. And what I love is that watching you go through the process of even provide those words of like comfort and acknowledgement and encouragement and empathy is like, it gives me an insight into what it must be like for what you teach parents to do with their children. So it really felt good for me. I'm sitting in here and I'm like, I'm not even the mom, but I felt this warmth. I felt like chills throughout my whole body at the words that you had to share and how kind you were in sharing them. So thank you for that. Would you have like maybe a role play that you would use whenever you're teaching parents about relating to their children? Like, what would be a common role play that you would walk through to guide parents?
Do you mean in terms of, well, I mean, we would role play. I mean, a big thing is parents not knowing how to respond to their children whenever they are having, whenever they're having big feelings, having big emotions, or one of the other hand-in-hand tools is setting limits. So it's not a permissive style of parenting. It's really important to have limits, to know where your limits are, and to do that being authentic to yourself. So if it's really important to you that you need to leave the park now, and you could stay for another half hour, but then dinner wouldn't be made, and then then the kids would be hungry, and then the whole evening would go wrong. So it's okay to have those limits and say, no, this is, I need to go now, I need to leave the park now. So often parents struggle with that a lot. So we would role play in our classes with that kind of thing, just to help parents, because we all have very different relationships with boundaries and limits, and it can be really tricky for some people. So and at Hand in Hand, it's all about connecting first before we bring the limit, and to bring the limit with as gently as we can. So some people it really helps them for that to be modeled. You just saying to your child, it's time to leave now, we're going to go. Yes, I know you're upset, we're leaving. And just to have those words and that tone of voice, and it could, that kind of thing can be really helpful for parents. So we do some things like that. But I think in terms of how to relate, and also I suppose when children are crying, like we would say, try and keep it to 5 words or less, anything you say to your child. So whenever they're very upset, you don't need to go into big long explanations. If we don't leave the park now, the dinner's going to be ruined, and we have to do this and we have to do that, all you have to say is, I know, it's hard. And then just listen, and yeah, it's time to go. So you just keep it, because it's all about the non-verbal cues as well. It's about being in that place where you're feeling calm and you can respond to your child, and you're sending that signal of safety that, you know, I know this is hard, but I'm here with you. You're not doing it alone. So that's the kind of tone that you want. And instead of, you know, these big long explanations. So I would even tell people to do it with no words and just and that's, you know, that's all you need to do. So yeah.
I love that. And I think that that's the piece that's so powerful about maybe going to a class like the ones that you put on, is you can read a book, but you don't get tonality. You don't get even like the intonation, or even the spaces or the pauses. And sometimes you don't get the languaging. So you can read a book that says, you know, be respectful of your children, be kind, be connected, be loving. But you don't get the languaging to go along with that, especially when it comes to setting boundaries, because you do want to be a loving parent, but there are also different boundaries that are important, and they're in place for reasons that maybe connect to your own values, whether it's making sure that you eat a meal at a great time, or, you know, that sleep is there so that people feel their best whenever they've had their nap, or whatever the case may be. But I think that sometimes that's what I found in parenting books that I'm missing out on, is languaging. So are there any tips that you have around that? Maybe things that are more effective to say versus others, like whether it's changing "I love you, but" to "I love you and," you know, just some of those examples. Would you have those to share?
Yeah, let's see now. I mean, I would say one example. Well, we at Hand in Hand, we wouldn't be big into getting kids to talk about their feelings or name their feelings. You just find that it's not that helpful. And what it does is, when kids are crying and expressing, we see that as a really good thing. And if you start saying them, you know, how are you feeling? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling, you know, upset? And trying to get them to name it, it actually takes them out of that emotional brain that's releasing these feelings, and it brings them into their thinking brain. So it kind of switches off that emotional release. And I think it's Dan Siegel actually that says "name it to tame it," and that's actually not, actually does do that. He is correct in that you name the feeling, it gets the thinking brain thinking, and it tames the emotional release. But we would say we want the emotional release. That's fine, you know, if we have the capacity to listen in that moment, then it's actually better just to let children express that. So it's probably more about what you know, about not saying things, like less is more. That and it's so much about the, you know, the non-verbal cues around checking in with yourself. And, you know, whenever your child is doing something that really annoys you, just taking a minute to check in and, you know, take a breath, and sometimes like rubbing your chest and doing this kind of gesture, and just bringing your nervous system back down. And, you know, maybe giving yourself a pep talk before you go in there and start to try and sort out or bring a limit or whatever it might be. So I think that is really important. And when you're listening to feelings, just the fewer words, the better. Just, you know, telling them that, you know, you're here. I know it's hard. You know, I'm listening, and not getting children to explain what's going on, because they often don't know on an emotional level. And we'd also say not to go back afterwards and rehash it all and dissect it all. You know, kids just live in the moment. So once it's gone, it's gone. They were having a hard time. They had a cry, and, you know, it doesn't really help them to go back and rehash it again afterwards. Just let it go. Yeah.
You had mentioned, I feel like we've covered most of the questions that came in. We've mentioned some of the tools that Hand in Hand Parenting use or encourage. So are there any tools that we haven't spoken about that you might like to mention?
So another one that we haven't talked about is the play listening, we call it, which is it's different from special time, and I absolutely love it. So it's another way to connect with your kids and to get them to cooperate with you through play. It's sort of a set amount of time, and the kids take the lead, and you're just there to say yes as much as possible. But with play listening, you can be a little bit more in control, and you can use it to like I said, to gain cooperation. But the key thing about it is you're really using it to connect with your kids. So a great example of that is with something like teeth brushing. So many parents have difficulties with getting their kids to brush their teeth, and because the kids, it's something they can control. You know, they're so out of control all day, people telling them what to do, and it feels really good for a kid just to go, no, and just it's something that they can control, and they see your reaction, they see that you're completely powerless, and they love that, you know, because that you've been in control of them all day long. So with what you can do in those situations is with play listening, and that's about connecting through laughter. So you try and get your kids to laugh, basically, and you try and get them to giggle without tickling them. We don't like tickles. But without tickling them, you try and see what makes them laugh. And this does two things. It connects. So, you know, kids love laughter. You know, if you're having fun and you're lighthearted and they're laughing, then, you know, that you feel very deeply connected to them and they're more likely to cooperate. But also laughter, giggles like that, it helps kids to release tension and to release like light fears and anxieties about things. So if you can get them giggling, it's actually very therapeutic as well. So with things like teeth brushing, if you can get like the classic one is, you know, getting the toothbrush to talk. And like I would say to my son, we had a real issue with this when he was younger. And I would say to him, let me see, what would I do? I'd be like, okay, where are your teeth? I can't find them. And I would go to, and you know, I'd pretend that the toothbrush was talking, and I'd go, oh, I think they're in your belly button. And I'd try and find them in his belly button. And then I'd try and find them in his armpit and between his toes. And he would be giggling. And you just keep it, as long as they're giggling, you just keep going. And then finally he'll be like, no, they're in here. And, you know, that's when you've struck gold, and you can, now it might take a few days. It might take, you have to be quite, but there's all sorts of games. And if you check out the Hand in Hand website, there are lists of games you can play around difficulties like teeth brushing and going to the toilet and getting coats on. And so you can really use play listening to connect and to follow that laughter and giggles and get cooperation. So that's one of our really fun tools to use as well.
I love that. Do you have, like, for yourself, are there like maybe 3 top parenting mentors that have been really crucial to your success as a parent?
Okay, well, I mean, I have to say Patty Whitfler, who is the founder of Hand in Hand Parenting. So Hand in Hand Parenting's been around for, I think, 40 years or something. And she came up with it. She developed it over many years of working with children and working with like-minded parents. And she came up with these 5 amazing tools that you can use. So she's based over in California. And she's still going strong, and she's an absolutely amazing person. So she would be my sort of top person for sure. And you know, with our courses we use her video materials, and she's just got such a lovely way of communicating, and she knows this stuff so well. So she would definitely be my top one. I'm not sure. I'm on the spot now with other people. So I'll have to have more of a think about that, because she's really the top.
That's fine. You can note her.
I suppose actually as well, Aletha Solter, another book that really inspired me a lot was called The Aware Baby, by Aletha Solter, and she talks a lot about, it's very similar to Hand in Hand Parenting. It's known as Aware Parenting, and that was a huge influence on me as well. And just understanding, she goes into a lot about understanding tears and crying in children. So I find that she's really inspiring to me as well.
That's amazing. Where can people get in touch with you and to find out more about Hand in Hand Parenting and maybe some of the courses that you're putting on or how you're helping people?
Yeah, so the best thing is to is social media, is either Facebook at both, and Instagram is at Pam Hand in Hand. So you can follow me there, and I think you can get in touch with me via email. So I'm running a class at the minute, but I'll be running more courses coming up. I also do one-to-one work with parents as well. So I would love to hear from you. And also the Hand in Hand website is which is handinhandparenting.org, I think. And there's loads of resources on there. There's loads of free free resources there too, as well as like self-guided courses and things like that. But loads of really good articles about every single parenting situation you can think of, how the hand-in-hand tools can be used to help. So it's a real wealth of resources on there if you've got anything specific that you need help with.
That's amazing. And you had mentioned, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You had mentioned when we got on the call, just you and I were chatting ahead of recording, that you were just releasing a blog post about hand-in-hand parenting and breastfeeding. So would you be open to just maybe highlighting a few key points of what you speak about and maybe where people can find the full post?
Yeah, so I'll share. It just got published on the Hand-in-Hand Parenting website this morning. So I'll forward you the link to that. And yes, so it's I just wrote about my own experience with breastfeeding and around limits around breastfeeding and around night weaning my son. So I really struggled with my daughter and became resentful around breastfeeding because she was waking so often at night, and I really struggled with that. So then when I was feeding my son, and when he was a bit older, you know, he was over 1, and the night feeding was getting very exhausting for me, and I decided to set some limits around that. So I talk about that in the blog, and I know that's a very emotive topic, but I was able to use the hand-in-hand tools to really, you know, I was putting a limit around the breastfeeding, but I was right there with him. I was saying yes to my connection and my warmth and my presence and all of those things, but I was saying no to actually breastfeeding him throughout the night. And so I go into that in a lot more detail about how the hand-in-hand tools really helped, and how listening partnerships helped me really get clear about what I was happy with and how I really felt about it, and really got me clear in my thinking around it. So I'm really happy to share that, and really happy to talk to people about that as well.
So important. And I think sometimes when people really love breastfeeding their children, but they face difficulty, sometimes they maybe don't have that space built in for them to talk about challenges because they don't want to come across as being resentful of something that they also love, or complaining about something that maybe other people didn't have the opportunity to do. So I love that you have shared your experiences as well as how you use the tools to navigate, you know, those feelings and to gain clarity around them, which is so powerful. Clarity in itself is just huge. So I guess to close things out, is there anything that you want to add before we do close it out?
No, I think I've really enjoyed the discussion. It's been great. Yeah. So
I have too. It's been amazing. So just to close it out, at Well-Fed Photography, we're all about living life in a way that outlives you. So leaving a legacy behind through, you know, either your parenting or the work that you're doing. And so I'd be interested to know what type of legacy you're hoping to leave behind and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's such a lovely question. And I mean, I think that, I'd be so happy to, you know, I have my 2 children, and just to, for them to grow up with a good emotional understanding of and a good emotional intelligence, and to be able to navigate their feelings. And it's not about doing things perfectly as a parent, because we can't, and our you know, we get things wrong. And I just hope that you know, that I'm able to raise 2 children that go out into the world with you know, with a good understanding of their feelings and their emotions and how that impacts on other people, and able to navigate their emotional world, really. And I mean, I think that's, for me, that would be such an amazing legacy, and you know, that they can, that the impact that could have in the world, just, you know, for them. And then I suppose just with any of the parents I touch, you know, that I work with, and you know, if I help them and support them in their parenting, and you know, it's such a rewarding job whenever you hear the difference that it's made in people's lives. Been able to implement the hand-in-hand tools, and to be able to really get good support, and you know, the little breakthroughs they have, all these little small wins that, you know, they make me so happy. And so, you know, there are so many really caring and you know, really amazing parents out there that are sort of committed to raising conscious and respectful children. So I just really hope to support more people to be able to do that.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. As I said, just through finding you on Instagram, we featured you on Businesses That We Love last year during the pandemic, whenever it first kind of started, and we were thinking of ways that we could help uplift fellow business owners. And just through that path of following you, following Hand Parenting, being introduced to it really through you, and then implementing things like special time, it's made such a positive impact in my life. And so I just want to thank you for that as well. And it's just been a pleasure to listen to you speak. There's been so much warmth through what you've shared. There's been so much connectivity, and I think that it will do nothing but just inspire people to go on and have a more refreshed, happier relationship with their children. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for doing this. It's so lovely to be asked. So thank you.
Thank you so much.